In the first game of the Sweet 16, we have two major events facing off: Hitler becoming Chancellor and the Revolution of 1830 to 1832. Both are major events in history, but one has to win. Who do you think will be the winner? The Revolution of 1830 to 32 is a time period when the people of France were tired of the way the kings were becoming more like dictators and wanted to go back to the ways of the old monarch. King Louis XVIII started enforcing other rules, such as censorship. The people started to want to rebel against him. When Charles became king, situations became worse. The people of France revolted against him. The overall morale is at an all-time high. Can they defeat Hitler? Now, Hitler becoming chancellor may seem like the underdog because there's just one person versus major countries, but do not pick that on the basis alone. Adolf Hitler is one man who can change the world to run the way he wants if he does it to the liking of the people. Can one person really beat a team of nations? It looks like Hitler becoming German chancellor is the victor. Hitler had his mindset on how Germany was going to change. On January 30th, 1933, he was named German chancellor. This was a game changer for Germany and the opportunity Hitler needed to get what he wanted.
The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand versus the Great Reform Bill passed in London. The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand was the deciding factor in the start of World War I. The Archduke and his wife Sophia were shot to death by Bosnian Serbian nationalists during an official visit to the Bosnian capital. The killing sparked a chain of events that led to the outbreak of the World War. The London Reform Bill was a law that changed the British electoral system. This was a response to many years of people's criticism to the electoral system and its unfairness. The Reform Bill was passed in a series of proposals to reform the voting and the British Parliament. The bills reformed voting by increasing the electoral for the House of Commons and removing certain inequalities in representation. After the well-fought game by the Great Reform Bill, the Archduke was in a 10-point lead and maintained the win. This importance served a greater impact not just on the war, but everything we know today.
In the next matchup, the Berlin Airlift, which is comprised of the Big Three, will meet up with Hitler in the London Blitz. One team plays off the fear of others, while the other team works together to defeat the ISIL player. This will be a tough one as Hitler continues to foul hard. A little bit of background against the home team. After World War II, Berlin was divided into 4 sectors. The Russians wanted Berlin to themselves. In June 1948, they decided to block off all ways of transportation from Germany into Berlin. The Russians wanted everyone to leave the area so it could be their home court, but US, France, Britain were already defended. The London Blitz occurred when Germany raided London in the middle of the night and continued to bomb it for 57 nights. After occupying France, Hitler had his eyes set on another place, England. He wanted to make sure he could go focus on invading the Soviet Union, but he had to make sure the other allies were not around to help. He started the invasion at sea and on land. He was trying to wear down the air forces, but he started to see that he was going to lose if he continued this. Hitler had to think of a new way to beat England. A new play was put into the lineup, a play that did not focus on intelligence and training, but rather the fear on London. On the first night, almost 500 people were killed after the bombing. It was a close one, but the Berlin Airlift defeats the London Blitz at the buzzer. This was because the Allies worked together to find a way to defeat the lone man standing by himself. Hitler believed that he did not need any help and therefore didn't depend on his teammates. This was a devastating blow.
French Revolution begins in Paris versus Nazism defeated in Berlin. The French Revolution was a period of time in France when the people overthrew the monarchy and took control of the government. The French Revolution lasted 10 years from 1789 to 1799. It began on July 14, 1789, when revolutionaries stormed a prison called the Bastille. The Bastille was a fortress built in the late 1300s to protect Paris during the Hundred Years' War. The Nazi regime ended up after its allies defeated Germany in May 1945, ending World War II in Europe. Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President of the Weimar Republic, Paul von Hindenburg, on July 30, 1933. The French Revolution was able to maintain a 13-point lead and win the matchup. The revolution was a great event because it infected the entire country instead of just a group like the Nazis.
The next 2 teams are both looking for a win. In fact, they both desperately need a win, as their independence more or less depends on it. The Big Three once again must come together and defeat Hitler at his own game. On the other side of the court, the European Revolution needs a win so that the working man can have his voice in the government and help decide what happens in the country. Many times a certain play changes the outcome of a game. The Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy ready to fight against the Germans. These invasions of beaches, bridges, and roads were met with a surprise by the German military. The Germans were convinced that the Allies would play zone defense. They were not prepared for the teamwork coming from all sides. By the end of the day, we see the countless players injured and being taken off the court. The big question is, can these underdogs come out as the victors? They are tired of the monarchy and want to change. After battling disease and increase in price on almost everything, poor crops, the people started to unite and sense of pride and nationalism began to rise. This could not go on any longer. What started in Sicily spread throughout France and Germany, showed the social unrest and how change was being demanded. This is mass chaos, and I do not see how they can defeat such an elite, put-together team. However, when people demand change, we usually start to see it. It is just a matter of getting this done and under control before the game day. Can this Hail Mary actually occur? D-Day comes out on top. This win is really no surprise. The Europeans cannot pull off a win. They had a tough time running the offense and struggled to hit shots. They could just not come together as a team and win.
World War II starts versus unification of Germany. World War II, also known as the Second World War, was a global event that lasted from 1939 to 1945. The vast majority of the world's countries, including the great powers, eventually formed two opposing military alliances, the Allies and the Axis powers. Among the causes of World War II were Italian fascism, Japanese militarism, and an invasion of China in the 1930s, and especially the political takeover in 1933 by Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Reasons for German unification was mainly because of military and economic success. German unification was due to Bismarck's wanting to combine the Western Germany and Northern Germany. With the French defeat, the German Empire was proclaimed in January 1871 in the Palace of Versailles, France. A very close game between them two, but World War II would win by the buzzer beater with 2 seconds left on the clock. The start of an entire war pulled through to have a greater impact over Germany's unification, even though it served a very important significance in its own rights.
The last game of the Sweet 16 is the Congress of Vienna and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Congress of Vienna is a team that was put together after the Napoleonic Wars. This team is made up of players from Austria, Prussia, Russia, Great Britain, Sweden, Spain, Portugal, and France. The one common goal they all have was to get rid of Napoleon once and for all. However, this is a division in a makeshift team. There seems to be a major four: Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Great Britain, and the minor four. It is very obvious that there was much friction within the team. Trying to figure out who is the power over the others is quite difficult. For the Cuban Missile Crisis, I have a little story to tell you that I would like you to listen and watch, which explains this team. Play the YouTube video.
The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 was when Kennedy faced off with Premier Khrushchev of the Soviet Union. See, back in '59, Cuba's Revolutionary War made it a tiny communist country right near the U.S. shore. That same year, the U.S. made a deal with Turkey's leaders to put U.S. nukes in Turkey to fire at Russia if needed. Flash forward to October 1962 again. Soviet nukes are found in Cuba like ours in Turkey right near them. The U.S. Joint Chiefs told JFK this was a good occasion to get rid of Cuba's government with a big U.S. invasion. But JFK said no, because those nukes were awfully frightening. If we struck Cuba, Russia might think attacking us would be the right thing. It could lead to nuclear war, and of all outcomes, that's the worst. So JFK said before invading, let's try something else first. So one night on TV, he announced the plan he'd made. He'd stop Soviet shipments to Cuba with a strict naval blockade. But Khrushchev of the Soviets said this was risking war. You can't just stop our ships, he said, the blockade will be ignored. And when the
Cuban Missile Crisis went. This game was quite a nail-biter in the beginning, but then Cuban Missile Crisis started to pull away. Tensions were at an all-time high, but fans began to relax, knowing that the Captain Kennedy would execute the right plays.